The automatic doors of Chicago O'Hare Airport slid open with a gentle whoosh as Dr. Maya Johnson stepped inside, rolling her black carry-on behind her. The familiar sounds of a busy airport filled the air around her. Announcements echoed through. The speaker's children laughed and cried in equal measure, and the constant hum of conversation created a backdrop that had become second nature to her over the years. Maya glanced at her phone to check the time. Flight 447 to Atlanta would begin boarding in 30 minutes. Perfect timing. She had just enough time to grab a coffee and maybe a sandwich before settling in for the 3-hour journey home. The medical conference she'd attended over the past 4 days had been intense but rewarding. Her presentation on innovative cardiac procedures had been well received, and she'd made some valuable connections with colleagues from across the country. As she walked through the terminal, Maya couldn't help but smile at the thought of returning home. Her small apartment in Atlanta wasn't much, but it was hers. More importantly, it meant she could sleep in her own bed tonight instead of another hotel room. The conference hotels were nice enough, but nothing beat the comfort of familiar surroundings. Though a coffee shop near her gate had a short line, which was unusual for a Friday evening, Maya ordered her usual, a medium coffee with just a splash of cream and a turkey sandwich for the flight. The barista, a young man with kind eyes, handed her the order with a genuine smile. "Safe travels," he said, and Maya thanked him before making her way to the gate area. Gate B12 was already bustling with activity even though boarding hadn't started yet. Maya found an empty seat near the windows where she could watch the ground crew preparing the aircraft. She pulled out her phone and sent a quick text to her sister, letting her know the flight was on time. As she sipped her coffee, Maya reflected on how far she'd come. 10 years ago, she was just another medical student drowning in textbooks and student loans. Now, at 35, she was one of the youngest department heads at Atlanta General Hospital. The journey hadn't been easy, but every challenge had been worth it. A family with 2 young children sat down nearby. The mother looked exhausted, while the father tried to keep the kids entertained with coloring books. Maya remembered traveling with her own family when she was younger. Her parents had saved for months to afford a family vacation, and the excitement of flying had kept her awake for days beforehand. The gate agent's voice crackled through the speaker, announcing that they would begin boarding in 15 minutes. Maya finished her coffee and gathered her things. She pulled out her boarding pass to double-check her seat assignment. 2A, first class. It had been an unexpected upgrade that the conference organizers had arranged for all the keynote speakers. Maya had to admit she was looking forward to the extra space and comfort. Her schedule at the hospital had been particularly demanding lately, with back-to-back surgeries and emergency consultations. The conference had been the first real break she'd taken in months, and even that had been work-related. As she waited, Maya noticed the diverse mix of travelers around her. A businessman in an expensive suit typed furiously on his laptop. A young couple shared earbuds listening to music together. An elderly woman knitted what looked like a baby blanket, her needles clicking in a steady rhythm. It was one of the things Maya loved about airports. They were temporary meeting places for people from all walks of life, each with their own story and destination. The boarding announcement finally came. "We'll now begin boarding Flight 447 to Atlanta, starting with our first-class passengers and those needing special assistance." Maya stood up and joined the small group heading toward the gate. She handed her boarding pass to the agent, who scanned it with a beep and wished her a pleasant flight. Walking down the jet bridge, Maya felt that familiar mix of anticipation and fatigue that came with air travel. The flight attendant at the aircraft door greeted her with a professional smile. "Welcome aboard. First class is to your right." Maya turned right and immediately appreciated the spacious cabin. The seats were wider than economy, with plenty of legroom and small pillows already placed on each seat. She found row 2 and located seat A by the window. Perfect. She stowed her carry-on in the overhead bin and settled into her seat. The leather was soft and the seat reclined further back than she was used to. Maya pulled out her medical journal from her purse, planning to catch up on some reading during the flight. More passengers began filing onto the plane. Maya watched as people found their seats, some struggling with oversized bags, others moving with the efficiency of frequent travelers. The flight attendants moved through the cabin, helping passengers and conducting their pre-flight preparations. A businessman took the seat across the aisle from Maya. He nodded politely before pulling out his own reading material. Behind them, she could hear a woman talking loudly on her phone about some business deal that had apparently gone very well. Maya opened her journal to an article about new minimally invasive surgical techniques. The research was fascinating, and she made mental notes about procedures she might want to discuss with her team back at the hospital. This was exactly how she'd hoped to spend the flight, quietly productive and relaxed. The boarding process continued, steadily. Maya glanced up occasionally to see the stream of passengers making their way to their seats. Some looked excited for their journey. Others appeared tired or stressed. She wondered briefly about their stories, where they were going, and why. The aircraft was filling up quickly now. Maya could hear the sounds of families getting settled, overhead bins closing, and the general bustle of people preparing for takeoff. One of the flight attendants walked through first class, offering passengers water or juice before departure. "Water would be great, thank you," Maya said when the attendant reached her row. She accepted the glass and took a sip, then returned to her reading. The article discussed success rates for a new cardiac procedure that her department had been considering implementing. The statistics were promising, and Maya found herself getting absorbed in the technical details. A few rows behind her, she could hear someone speaking in an increasingly agitated tone, but Maya didn't pay much attention. Airports and airplanes often brought out stress in people, and it wasn't uncommon to hear raised voices during the boarding process. Maya turned the page of her journal and continued reading, looking forward to a peaceful flight home. Little did she know that the agitated voice behind her belonged to someone who was about to turn her quiet evening into something she would never forget. The last few passengers were boarding now, and Maya could sense the energy in the cabin shifting as people settled in for departure. She took another sip of water and tried to focus on her reading, but something in the air felt different. There was a tension building that she couldn't quite put her finger on. Soon she would understand exactly what that tension meant. Maya was halfway through the second page of her medical journal when she became aware of someone standing beside her seat. She looked up to see a well-dressed woman in her 50s with perfectly styled blonde hair and an expensive-looking handbag clutched tightly in her manicured hands. The woman was staring down at Maya with an expression that seemed oddly intense. "Excuse me," the woman said, her voice carrying a tone that managed to be both sweet and sharp at the same time. "I think there might be some confusion here." Maya set down her journal and looked up with a polite smile. "I'm sorry. Is there something I can help you with?" The woman's smile looked forced, like she was trying very hard to appear friendly while something else entirely was going on behind her eyes. "Well, I couldn't help but notice that you're sitting in first class, and I just wanted to make sure everything is sorted out properly." Maya felt a small knot form in her stomach, though she wasn't entirely sure why. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean. Is there a problem?" "Oh, no problem at all," the woman said, waving her hand dismissively. "It's just that sometimes there are mix-ups with seating assignments, you know? Computer errors and such. I've been flying for over 20 years and I've seen it happen many times." The woman's explanation didn't make much sense to Maya, but she decided to play along. "I see. Well, this is definitely my seat. I have my boarding pass right here if you'd like to see it." Maya reached into her purse and pulled out her boarding pass, holding it up so the woman could see the seat number clearly printed on it. 2A, just like the seat I'm in. The woman barely glanced at the boarding pass before shaking her head. "Oh, honey, I'm sure that's what it says, but these computer systems make mistakes all the time. Trust me, I know how these things work. There's been an error and you're going to need to move to your correct seat." Now Maya was genuinely confused. "My correct seat? This is my correct seat. The boarding pass shows 2A, and this is 2A. Listen," the woman said, and her voice was starting to lose its fake sweetness. "I don't want to make a big scene here, but it's very obvious that there's been a mistake. Someone like you doesn't just end up in first class by accident. The airline probably put you in the wrong section." The words hit Maya like a cold splash of water. Someone like you. The meaning was crystal clear, even though the woman hadn't said it directly. Maya felt her heart rate increase, but she kept her voice calm and steady. Not sure what you mean by someone like me, but I can assure you that I'm in the correct seat. I purchased this ticket myself, and the conference organizers arranged for the upgrade. The woman let out a small laugh that had no humor in it. Conference organizers? What kind of conference? Her tone suggested she didn't believe a word Maya was saying. A medical conference. I'm a doctor. A doctor? The woman's eyebrows shot up in obvious disbelief. Really? What kind of doctor? Maya felt her patience starting to wear thin, but she answered anyway. I'm a cardiologist. I'm the head of cardiology at Atlanta General Hospital. Uh-huh. The woman's expression made it clear she thought Maya was lying. Well, regardless of what you claim to be, you're still in the wrong seat. These tickets cost thousands of dollars, and they're not just handed out to anyone. Other passengers were starting to notice the conversation now. Maya could see people turning their heads, trying to figure out what was happening. The businessman across the aisle had stopped reading and was watching with obvious interest. Ma'am, Maya said, keeping her voice as professional as possible. I understand your concern, but I'm definitely in the right seat. If you think there's been an error with your own booking, I'd suggest speaking with one of the flight attendants. My booking is fine, the woman snapped, her fake politeness finally dropping completely. I always fly first class. I'm a platinum member with this airline. The problem is that people like you somehow end up where you don't belong, making the rest of us uncomfortable. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Several passengers gasped audibly, and Maya could feel every eye in the first-class cabin turning toward them. The woman had just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Maya took a deep breath before responding. I think you need to be very careful about what you're saying right now. I'm saying exactly what needs to be said, the woman replied, her voice getting louder. This is first class, not charity class. Real passengers pay real money to sit here, and we shouldn't have to deal with people who obviously don't belong. The businessman across the aisle had heard enough. Excuse me, he said firmly, but this is completely inappropriate. This lady has shown you her boarding pass, and you need to back off. The woman whirled around to face him. Mind your own business. This doesn't concern you. Actually, it does concern me, he replied. We're all trying to have a peaceful flight, and you're causing a disturbance based on nothing but your own prejudices. Prejudices? The woman scoffed. I'm just trying to make sure everyone is in their proper place. There are rules and procedures for a reason. Maya stood up from her seat, realizing that this situation was escalating beyond anything she could handle diplomatically. Ma'am, I think we need to get a flight attendant involved here. Yes, the woman agreed quickly. Let's get a flight attendant. They'll sort this out and get you moved to where you actually belong. Maya reached up and pressed the call button above her seat. Within moments, a flight attendant appeared at their row. He was a Hispanic man in his 30s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor that suggested he'd dealt with difficult situations before. Is everything all right here, ladies? He asked, looking between Maya and the woman with the trained neutrality of someone accustomed to handling passenger disputes. The woman immediately launched into her complaint. Yes, there's been a terrible mix-up with the seating. This person is obviously in the wrong seat, and I need you to move her to economy where she belongs. The flight attendant turned to Maya with a questioning look. Ma'am, could I see your boarding pass, please? Maya handed over her boarding pass, grateful to finally have someone official involved. The flight attendant examined it carefully, then looked at the seat number above Maya's row. This appears to be correct, he said slowly. This is seat 2A, and that's what's printed on your boarding pass. But that's impossible, the woman insisted. Look at her. Does she look like someone who can afford first class? There's obviously been some kind of error in the computer system. The flight attendant's expression hardened slightly. Maya could see that he was beginning to understand exactly what was happening here. Other passengers were openly staring now, and Maya could hear whispered conversations starting throughout the cabin. Ma'am, the flight attendant said to the woman, I'm going to need to see your boarding pass as well. The woman fumbled in her purse and pulled out her own boarding pass, handing it over with an air of confidence. Here, You'll see that I'm supposed to be in first class and there's clearly been a mix-up. The flight attendant took the boarding pass and examined it carefully. Maya watched his expression change as he read the details. A small frown appeared on his face, and he looked up at the woman with a very different expression than before. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "we need to have a conversation." The flight attendant held both boarding passes in his hands, examining them with the careful attention of someone who knew exactly what he was looking for. Maya watched his face as he compared the documents, noting how his professional expression shifted slightly with each detail he reviewed. "Ma'am," he said to the woman, his voice measured and calm, "could you please tell me your name?" The woman looked annoyed at the question. "Patricia Williams. Mrs. Patricia Williams. My husband is Robert Williams of Williams, Thompson and Associates. Perhaps you've heard of them. They're one of the most prominent law firms in the city." Maya noticed how quickly Patricia had dropped her husband's credentials into the conversation, as if his professional status would somehow resolve the situation in her favor. The flight attendant, whose name tag read Carlos, didn't seem particularly impressed. "Mrs. Williams," Carlos continued, "and could you tell me what seat you believe you're supposed to be in?" "First class, obviously," Patricia replied with growing impatience. "I always fly first class. I'm a platinum member with this airline, and I've been flying with you people for over 15 years. I think I know where I'm supposed to sit." Carlos nodded thoughtfully. "I understand that you're a valued customer, Mrs. Williams. However, according to your boarding pass, you're actually assigned to seat 12B. Patricia's face immediately flushed red. "That's impossible. There's been a mistake. I specifically requested first class when I booked this flight. Seat 12B is in the main cabin," Carlos explained gently. "Not in first class." "That's ridiculous." Patricia's voice was getting louder, and every passenger in the first class section was now openly watching the drama unfold. "I demand to speak to your supervisor immediately. This is completely unacceptable." Maya remained seated, trying to stay out of the escalating conflict while also feeling a growing sense of vindication. It was becoming clear that Patricia's accusations had been completely unfounded. "Mrs. Williams," Carlos said, maintaining his professional composure despite Patricia's increasingly hostile tone, "I am the senior flight attendant on this aircraft. I can certainly have the captain speak with you if necessary, but first I'd like to resolve this seating issue." "The seating issue is simple," Patricia snapped. "That woman," she pointed directly at Maya, "is sitting in a seat that costs more than she probably makes in a month. It's obvious that someone made an error, and you need to fix it immediately." Carlos turned to Maya with an apologetic expression. "Dr. Johnson, I'm very sorry you're having to deal with this situation. Your boarding pass is completely valid and you are absolutely in the correct seat." Maya appreciated that Carlos had addressed her by her professional title, which he must have seen on her boarding pass. "Thank you. I understand these things can be confusing sometimes." Patricia's eyes widened with fury. "Doctor, you're actually going to stand there and pretend she's a doctor? Look at her. Use your common sense." "Mrs. Williams," Carlos said, and his voice now carried a warning tone, "I need you to be very careful about what you say next. Your comments are inappropriate and offensive to other passengers." "Offensive?" Patricia laughed bitterly. "What's offensive is having to deal with people who clearly don't belong in first class. I pay good money for these seats so I don't have to be around certain types of people." The businessman across the aisle stood up. "That's enough. Ma'am, your behavior is completely out of line, and frankly, you're embarrassing yourself." Other passengers began murmuring their agreement. An elderly woman a few rows back spoke up. "Young lady, you should be ashamed of yourself. That doctor has been nothing but polite while you've been absolutely terrible." Patricia whirled around to face the other passengers. "You're all going to take her side? Really? When it's obvious what's happening here?" "What's obvious," said a man in a business suit, "is that you're making assumptions based on prejudice, and it's disgusting to watch." Maya felt a mixture of gratitude and embarrassment as more passengers began speaking up in her defense. She hadn't asked for this confrontation, and she certainly hadn't wanted it to become a public spectacle. Carlos raised his hand to quiet the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, please let me handle this situation." Mrs. Williams, I need you to come with me so we can discuss your seating assignment privately. I'm not going anywhere, Patricia declared. I'm a paying customer, and I demand that this situation be resolved immediately. That woman needs to move to her proper seat in the back of the plane where she belongs, Mrs. Williams, Carlos said firmly. Dr. Johnson's seat assignment is correct. Your seat assignment is 12B in the main cabin. If you continue to refuse to take your assigned seat, I'll have no choice but to contact airport security. Patricia's face turned an even deeper shade of red. Airport security? Are you threatening me? Do you have any idea who my husband is? Robert Williams could buy and sell this entire airline. When he hears about how I've been treated, heads are going to roll. Ma'am, I'm not threatening you. I'm explaining the consequences of refusing to follow crew member instructions. Every passenger must sit in their assigned seat. That's a federal regulation. Federal regulation? Patricia scoffed. The only regulation being broken here is allowing people into first class who clearly can't afford it. Someone obviously made a mistake or gave her some kind of charity upgrade, and now real passengers are suffering for it. Maya had heard enough. She stood up and faced Patricia directly. Mrs. Williams, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I am Dr. Maya Johnson. I am the head of cardiology at Atlanta General Hospital. I have 2 medical degrees and over 10 years of experience saving people's lives. I paid for this seat with my own money that I earned through years of hard work and dedication. Your assumptions about me are based on nothing but prejudice, and they say far more about you than they do about me. Patricia stared at Maya for a moment, seeming momentarily taken aback by the calm authority in her voice. But her prejudice was stronger than any momentary doubt. Anyone can claim to be a doctor, Patricia said dismissively. That doesn't mean anything. The fact remains that you don't belong in first class and everyone here knows it. Actually, Carlos interjected, Dr. Johnson's identification confirms her professional credentials. Moreover, her ticket was purchased by the American Medical Association for speakers at their annual conference. Everything about her booking is legitimate and proper. Patricia's confidence wavered for the first time. The American Medical Association? Yes, Carlos replied. Dr. Johnson was a keynote speaker at their conference in Chicago. The AMA purchased first-class tickets for all their featured speakers. Maya could see Patricia processing this information, trying to reconcile it with her preconceived notions. But instead of backing down, Patricia doubled down on her position. I don't care who supposedly paid for her ticket, Patricia said. This is still first class, and there are standards that need to be maintained. Some people just don't fit in with the type of clientele that belongs up here. The cabin fell silent. Patricia had just crossed another line, making her discriminatory views even more explicit than before. Carlos looked around at the other passengers, all of whom were staring at Patricia with expressions ranging from disgust to disbelief. Mrs. Williams, Carlos said quietly, you need to take your assigned seat immediately, or I will call the captain and request that airport security remove you from this aircraft. Carlos stepped back and reached for the phone at the front of the first-class cabin. Patricia's eyes widened as she realized he was serious about his threat to involve the captain and airport security. Wait, she said quickly. You don't need to call anyone. I'm sure we can work this out like reasonable adults. I've been trying to work this out reasonably, Carlos replied, his hand still on the phone. But you've refused to cooperate and you've made inappropriate comments to other passengers. Dr. Johnson has done nothing wrong, while you've caused a significant disturbance. Patricia looked around the cabin, seeing the disapproving faces of every other passenger. For the first time since the confrontation began, she seemed to realize that she wasn't winning any allies with her behavior. Look, she said, trying to regain some composure. Maybe I came on a little strong, but you have to understand my position. I fly first class regularly and I've never seen, it's unusual to see certain people in this section. Maya felt her anger rising again at Patricia's inability to stop making discriminatory comments, even when she was supposedly trying to apologize. Certain people? Maya repeated. You mean black people? Is that what you're trying not to say? Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Maya replied. It's been clear from the beginning what this is really about. Carlos held up his hand. Ladies, let's focus on resolving the seating issue. Mrs. Williams, I need you to show me some identification so I can verify your booking details. Patricia fumbled in her purse and pulled out her driver's license, handing it to Carlos with shaking hands. Maya noticed that Patricia's confidence was crumbling as the situation became more official. Carlos examined the license carefully, then looked at Patricia's boarding pass again. He pulled out a small device that looked like a phone and began typing on it. Maya assumed he was checking Patricia's reservation in the airline's computer system. After a few minutes of typing and scrolling, Carlos looked up with an expression that Maya couldn't quite read. Mrs. Williams, I need to ask you some questions about your booking. What kind of questions? Patricia asked, her voice smaller than it had been throughout the entire confrontation. When did you purchase your ticket for this flight? I don't. No, maybe a week ago. My assistant handles most of my travel arrangements. Carlos nodded and typed something else into his device. And did you specifically request a first-class seat? Of course I did. I always fly first class. I told you. I'm a platinum member. Yes, I can see your platinum status in the system, Carlos said. However, there seems to be some confusion about your booking. Maya watched Patricia's face as a look of uncertainty crossed her features. What do you mean, confusion? Mrs. Williams, according to our records, you did request a first-class upgrade when you booked this flight. Patricia looked relieved. See? I told you there was a mistake. However, Carlos continued, your request was denied because first class was already fully booked. You were placed on the upgrade waiting list, but no first-class seats became available. Patricia stared at him blankly. That's impossible. My assistant confirmed my first-class reservation. Your assistant may have misunderstood the booking confirmation, Carlos explained gently. Sometimes passengers receive confirmation that they've been placed on an upgrade list, and they interpret that as confirmation of the upgrade itself. Maya could see the realization slowly dawning on Patricia's face. The woman who had been so confident about her rightful place in first class was beginning to understand that she had been wrong all along. But I always get upgraded, Patricia stammered. I'm a platinum member. They always take care of me. Being a platinum member does give you priority for upgrades, Carlos agreed. But it doesn't guarantee an upgrade when first class is completely sold out. Tonight's flight has been fully booked in first class for over a month. Patricia looked around the first-class cabin as if seeing it clearly for the first time. Every seat was indeed occupied, mostly by business travelers and a few families who appeared to be returning from vacations. So you're telling me, Patricia said slowly, that I'm supposed to sit in economy? Seat 12B in the main cabin, yes ma'am. That's what you paid for and that's what's available on tonight's flight. Maya watched as the full weight of the situation hit Patricia. Not only had she been wrong about the seating arrangements, but she had made a complete fool of herself in front of an entire cabin full of people, based on nothing but her own prejudiced assumptions. This is ridiculous, Patricia said, but her voice lacked the conviction it had carried earlier. There has to be some mistake. Carlos shook his head sympathetically. I understand your disappointment, Mrs. Williams, but there's no mistake. Your seat assignment is correct, and Dr. Johnson's seat assignment is also correct. So what you're telling me, Patricia said, her voice barely above a whisper, is that she actually belongs in first class, and I belong in economy? That's exactly what I'm telling you, Carlos confirmed. The irony was not lost on anyone in the cabin. The woman who had insisted that Maya didn't belong in first class was the one who actually didn't have a first-class seat. Maya felt a mixture of vindication and pity as she watched Patricia grapple with this reversal. Mrs. Williams, Carlos said gently, I need you to gather your belongings and move to your assigned seat so we can prepare for departure. Patricia stood frozen for a moment, as if she couldn't quite process what was happening. Then she slowly began gathering her things from the overhead bin, where she had stowed them when she first boarded. I can't believe this is happening, she muttered to herself as she pulled down her expensive handbag. Maya remained seated, watching the scene unfold with a sense of surreal disbelief. The woman who had tried to humiliate her and force her out of her seat was now the one being escorted to economy class. Dr. Johnson, Carlos said, turning to Maya. I apologize profusely for this disruption. Is there anything I can do to make the rest of your flight more comfortable? Maya shook her head. Thank you, Carlos. I appreciate how professionally you handled this situation. Patricia paused on her way out of first class and looked back at Maya. For a moment, Maya thought she might actually apologize for her behavior. Instead, Patricia just turned and walked toward the back of the plane without saying another word. As Patricia disappeared into the main cabin, the first-class passengers began talking among themselves about what they had just witnessed. Maya heard fragments of their conversations expressing support for her and criticism of Patricia's behavior. The businessman across the aisle leaned over. Doctor, I just want to say that you handled that with incredible grace. That woman should be ashamed of herself. Maya smiled tiredly. Thank you. I appreciate your support. Carlos made one final check of the first-class cabin, ensuring that all passengers were properly seated and ready for departure. As he passed Maya's row, he stopped and spoke quietly to her. Dr. Johnson, I want you to know that this airline does not tolerate discrimination of any kind. Mrs. Williams's behavior was completely unacceptable, and I'll be filing a report about this incident. Maya nodded, grateful for his support, but also ready for the confrontation to be completely over. She just wanted to get home. As the aircraft pushed back from the gate, Maya finally felt herself beginning to relax. The confrontation with Patricia was over, and the normal sounds of flight preparation filled the cabin. She could hear the flight attendants going through their safety demonstrations, the gentle hum of the engines, and the quiet conversations of passengers settling in for the journey. Carlos appeared at her seat with a warm smile. Dr. Johnson, the captain has asked me to personally ensure that you have everything you need for a comfortable flight. We'd like to upgrade your meal service to our premium selection, and all of your beverages tonight will be complimentary. Maya was touched by the gesture. That's very kind, but it's really not necessary. It absolutely is necessary, Carlos replied firmly. What happened earlier was inexcusable, and we want to make sure the rest of your experience with us is excellent. As the plane taxied toward the runway, Maya noticed that several other passengers kept glancing in her direction, not with suspicion or curiosity, but with what appeared to be respect and sympathy. The elderly woman from a few rows back even gave her an encouraging smile and a small wave. During takeoff, Maya found herself reflecting on the entire incident. She had encountered prejudice before in her life and career, but rarely had it been so blatant and public. What struck her most was not Patricia's ignorance, but the immediate support she had received from other passengers. It reminded her that for every person like Patricia, there were many more who recognized discrimination when they saw it and were willing to speak up against it. Once the aircraft reached cruising altitude, Carlos returned with Maya's dinner. True to his word, it was far more elaborate than the standard first-class meal. He had also brought her a complimentary glass of wine and a small box of chocolates. From the flight crew, he explained as he set everything down. We hope this helps make up for the unpleasant start to your evening. As Maya ate her dinner, she overheard snippets of conversation from other passengers. The businessman across the aisle was on a phone call, telling someone about the most incredible display of grace under pressure he had ever witnessed. A couple behind her was discussing how impressed they were with how she had handled herself. About an hour into the flight, Maya was surprised when the elderly woman who had smiled at her earlier approached her seat. She was a petite lady with silver hair and kind eyes, probably in her 70s. I hope you don't mind the interruption, dear, the woman said softly. I just wanted to tell you how much I admired the way you handled that terrible situation earlier. Maya set down her book and smiled. Thank you so much. That's very kind of you to say. I'm Helen, by the way, Helen Davis. I retired last year, after 40 years as a teacher, and I've seen my share of bullies over the years. That woman was a classic bully, trying to use intimidation to get her way. It's nice to meet you, Helen. I'm Maya. Helen leaned in conspiratorially. Between you and me, I was hoping that flight attendant would have her arrested. The nerve of some people, making assumptions about others based on their appearance. It's 2025, for heaven's sake. Maya appreciated Helen's indignation on her behalf, but she also felt a sense of compassion for Patricia, despite everything that had happened. I think she was just confused about her seating assignment and let her emotions get the better of her. Helen raised an eyebrow. Oh, honey, that wasn't confusion. That was prejudice, plain and simple. But you're very gracious to give her the benefit of the doubt. After Helen returned to her seat, Maya found herself thinking about the incident from different angles. As a doctor, she was trained to diagnose problems and find solutions. Patricia's behavior suggested someone who was deeply insecure and used prejudice as a way to feel superior to others. It was sad, really. Maya was pulled from her thoughts when Carlos approached with a message. Dr. Johnson, the captain would like to speak with you before we land, if you have a moment. Maya was curious about what the captain might want to discuss, but she agreed. A few minutes later, Carlos escorted her to the front of the aircraft, where a distinguished-looking man, in a pilot's uniform, was waiting. Dr. Johnson, I'm Captain Rodriguez. I wanted to personally apologize for what happened during boarding. That kind of behavior has no place on our aircraft or anywhere else. Maya shook his hand. Thank you, Captain. I appreciate that, but really, your crew handled everything perfectly. Carlos told me how professionally you conducted yourself throughout the entire incident. As it happens, my daughter is a medical student, and I know how hard doctors work to get where they are. What that passenger said to you was completely out of line. The captain paused and looked slightly uncomfortable. I also wanted you to know that we've been in contact with our corporate office about Mrs. Williams. Her behavior violated several of our passenger conduct policies, and there will be consequences. Maya nodded, though she wasn't sure what to say. She didn't want Patricia to face serious repercussions, but she also understood that airlines had to take discrimination seriously. We'd also like to offer you a voucher for a future flight as our way of apologizing for this experience. The captain continued. That's very generous, but honestly, the way your crew handled everything was exemplary. I don't feel like I need any compensation. Captain Rodriguez smiled. Doctor, please accept it. We want you to know that you're always welcome on our airline, and we hope this incident won't discourage you from flying with us again. Maya accepted the voucher graciously, then returned to her seat for the remainder of the flight. As they began their descent into Atlanta, she looked out the window at the city lights below and felt a sense of gratitude, not just for arriving home safely, but for the reminder that most people were fundamentally decent and willing to stand up for what's right. As the plane touched down and taxied to the gate, Maya gathered her belongings and prepared to disembark. Several passengers stopped to speak with her as they left the aircraft, expressing their admiration for how she had handled the situation and their disgust with Patricia's behavior. The businessman from across the aisle handed her his business card. Doctor, if you ever need a lawyer for anything, please don't hesitate to call. What happened tonight was discrimination, and there are legal remedies available if you choose to pursue them. Maya thanked him, but knew she wouldn't be calling. She just wanted to put the entire incident behind her and focus on the positive aspects of what had happened. She had been reminded that standing up for yourself was important, that most people would support you when you're in the right, and that grace under pressure was one of the most powerful responses to prejudice. As she walked through the airport, toward baggage claim, Maya's phone buzzed with a text from her sister asking how the flight had been. Maya smiled and typed back, Interesting. I'll tell you all about it when I get home. She collected her luggage and headed toward the exit, looking forward to sleeping in her own bed and returning to her normal routine at the hospital. The conference seemed like it had happened weeks ago instead of just hours earlier. Outside the airport, as Maya waited for her ride, she thought about Patricia and wondered if the experience might cause her to reflect on her behavior and attitudes. Maya hoped so. Everyone deserved the chance to learn and grow from their mistakes. The ride home was quiet and peaceful, a perfect end to an eventful day. As Maya finally walked into her apartment, she felt grateful for her life, her career, and her ability to handle challenging situations with dignity. Tomorrow she would return to saving lives at the hospital, but tonight she had stood up for something important and made a difference in her own small way. The incident on the plane would become a story she would share with friends and colleagues. Not as a tale of victimization, but as an example of how responding to prejudice with grace and confidence could change minds and inspire others to do the right thing. In the end, that was perhaps the most valuable lesson of all.